let's continue talking about how to set the proper price for your products and services. So after you've thought about the basic pricing objective, about what objective your pricing strategy is meant to achieve in the entire strategy of your marketing or your firm, the next thing to think about is to determine demand, to think about demand, and more specifically, to think about how demand for your products and services will change as a function of price, right? So having some idea about how customers will react to changes in price, irrespective of whether the price is going up or going down. Now, and one of the most popular concepts or frameworks to think about this question is the demand function. Now, the demand function, you may know that already from other disciplines like microeconomics, where it's also a very popular concept. Now, the demand function is very simple in that it posits that demand X is dependent on price P, and mostly that there's a negative relationship. So meaning you raise prices, demand will go down, you lower prices, demand will go up. So that's for almost all kinds of products. Now that's a very basic proposition. Now apart from that, on an analytical level, you need to have some kind of idea or notion about the functional relationship between X on the one hand and P on the other hand. Now the most simple form to think about that is to assume that demand and price are related in a linear function. So meaning demand X is a function of A minus B times P, and P being the price. Now this is also what you see down here in the graph, where price P is on the x-axis and demand X is on the y-axis, and showing a linear relationship between X and P. Now let's look at the different components of the linear function. So what does this parameter A mean? Now let's assume you ask a price of 0 for your products, meaning you're just giving it away. Now what is the demand in that case, in that linear function? So what does the demand come to if you ask for a price of 0? Now that is A, obviously, right? Now A is the saturation level. Now saying, even if you didn't ask for any price, if you gave it away for free, how many people would want your product? Now, that's one end of the function. Now, the other end of the function is A divided by B. Now, what does that mean? Now, A divided by B, now that's the price, the highest price that you ask for, that's the price where nobody would buy. Now, let's assume X would be 0. Now, you plug that into the function A minus B times P. Now that will give you a price P which equals A divided by B. So these 2 points, A on the one hand and A divided by B on the other hand, are the 2 extremes of that function. And the demand function in that case would show you different levels of demands at different levels of price. So that's one form to think about it, to assume a linear function, a linear relationship between X and P. Now, of course, you could say, well, this is too simple, right? So linear functions are easy to calculate with. That's why we love them. But, I mean, they're not realistic. Now, especially the fact that there's some kind of saturation level, that's absurd, right? So more people wanting your product if you give it away for free, so maybe that's a more plausible assumption. Now, you can have different functions, say, a different functional relationship, a multiplicative relationship where X equals A times P by the power of B. Now, then the demand function looks a lot different. Now it's a convex curve, right? So it's still a negative relationship, but it's a convex curve. Now, and also, importantly, this means that there's no saturation level on the one hand, and also that there's no maximal price on the other hand. So you're kind of being more lenient about the assumption of linear relationships. But again, this depends on your assumption about how the market works and how the market is going to react to changes in price. Another very important idea in this respect is to, and again, you may have heard that from microeconomics if you completed a course in that area, now is something they call price sensitivity or price elasticity. Now, I said that in most cases, the relationship between demand and price is negative, right? So you increase the price, demand drops, you drop the price, demand goes up. Now, this seems kind of trivial, right? So I would say, yes, I believe that, right? Now, but what you really want to know or need to know from a company perspective is how big is a change, right? So I'm thinking about increasing my prices, say by 1, 2, or 5, or even 10%. Now, the idea is, well, you increase price, you will lose demand, but how much will I lose? Right? So will the demand that I lose, will that be made up by the extra profits that I make by raising my prices? Now this again refers, to the curve, to the nature of the curve, how steep it is, and this is what we call elasticity, right? So elasticity, price elasticity defines the ratio of the relative change in demand with respect to the relative change in price, right? So it describes how demand reacts to changes in price at a specific point. And as a company perspective, now this is very important to know when you're thinking about changing prices. So I go up, will I lose a lot of demand, so it's not a good idea, or will I lose a tiny bit, but yes, it may still be a good idea to raise the price because I will be more profitable. Right? Now it's very important for you to know, apart from that very trivial relationship, that it's negative, now to get to know more about it, to get a better idea about the exact specific nature about the relationship at a given point in the price curve. Now again, you can calculate that through the demand function, which is not what I'm going to do now. But what I want to talk about is just on a conceptual level, when is elasticity high or low? So elasticity is high means people are very price sensitive. Elasticity is low is meaning people are not very price sensitive. You can play around with the price and nothing happens, right? So apart from the analytical level, we try to calculate that and put that into specific numbers. I think there are a range of factors that would account for that on a conceptual basis to give you some kind of idea, right? Now, so what we know from research is that price sensitivity or elasticity is decreased when the product is more distinctive, right? Now, meaning when the product is very distinctive and people really want the product, you may be able to raise prices without much happening, right? Now, let's again take the example of Apple. Apple, whether it's justified or not, has very loyal and convinced customers who really like the Apple brand. Now, meaning because people really want the Apple brand, they really want the new iPhone, they can raise the price, they raise the bar even higher, and not much will happen, right? Because at least to a person who's really crazy about Apple products, a Samsung, a competitive product, will not cut it, right? So meaning they can play around with the price. That's number one. Number two is, and that's an interesting one, buyers cannot easily compare the quality of substitutes, right? So assuming the price goes up of a product and you say, no, I don't want to pay that anymore. Now that also assumes that if you still want to consume a product in the general category, that you have some knowledge or some possibility to buy a substitute. Now, one of my favorite examples in this area is wine, right? I mean, I don't mean in terms of drinking it, right? But in terms of providing a good example for elasticity. Now, what makes a good wine? I mean, that's a really tough question, right? I mean, assuming that you drink wine. Now, you can tell if a wine is good or not, if you like it, right? Now you can't really say if it's good or not. You can typically tell whether you like it, yes or no. Now the problem is, taste is a very subjective experience. So the wine that I like best, you may find horrible, and vice versa, right? So assessing the quality of a wine, so assessing if the price that you're paying, if that's a good or a fair price, is very difficult and very subjective. Now let's assume in your favorite wine, the price would be risen by 10 to 20%. Now, of course, you can switch to a million other bottles of wine, but how do you compare the quality, right? You don't know, because it's such a subjective experience. Now, in this case, research says there's some leeway for companies, right? So I could push it a bit more as a company, because I know you will not switch away that easily. Now, the third one, and that's fairly intuitive, elasticity is decreased, so people are not as price sensitive when the expenditure is a smaller part of the buyer's total income, right? Now, let's assume you go out and buy flour or salt, not a very exciting product, but most of us need to buy it. Now they say, well, what is a pack of salt? I don't know, €1, €1.50, I have no clue really. So assuming they would raise the price by 10%, they will say, well, nobody will even notice, right? Now this is doable, and people will pay because they're not interested in salt. They will not notice it, and hence, they're not going to be very price sensitive. As say compared to a smartphone, where people will know the prices, and the smartphone is about a tablet is a big part of your monthly budget or your budget in general, and then people will be more sensitive to increases in price. Now, and also the last point, now price sensitivity is decreased when the product is used in conjunctions with other assets that you have previously bought. Now again, let's assume you want to buy the new generation iPhone or iPad. Now they raise prices yet again, right? Saying, well, no, I've had it in theory. Now the problem is that all your pictures and all your music and all your media content is already stored in the iTunes systems, right? Now, yes, you may switch away, but that would incur such high switching costs that you say, well, maybe I'm willing to pay that extra money just to save me from all that trouble, right? So everything else that you've bought beforehand, and that's part of the reason why iTunes is there in the first place. Now, in terms of generating lock-in and kind of keeping you in the system, and also making you less sensitive to changes in price. So to sum up and to come to an end in this point, the last thing I want to show you is what are price elasticity in practice. So how do they play out? What do they look like when you look at real products? Now, what I have here is a study that looked at price elasticity across different product categories in the consumer goods sector. So stuff that we buy on a daily basis, right? So in terms of price elasticity, higher numbers signify higher sensitivity, right? Now a higher number indicates that the relative change in demand is bigger than the relative change in price. Now these people, Danaher and Brody, they would look what is the price elasticity across these different types of consumer goods. Now they can see, well, it's pretty high in the context of jams, right? So minus 4.34, that's pretty high. Now, and I guess that makes sense, right? Because I would assume that none of us are crazy about jam. So yes, we like jam, but I think most people do not have a favorite brand of jam, right? So strawberry jam seems to be strawberry jam. There's not that many ways around that, and not strong brands, so it doesn't really matter what kind of brand you have as long as you like it. Now, that makes sense, right? Now, in that case, increasing the price or decreasing the price will lead to pretty large changes in demand, right? Now, the same goes for washing powders, same argument with the jam, an elasticity of minus 2.71, and also to a lesser degree in spaghetti. Now, what's interesting, so the last category is interesting, right? Now, disposable nappies. Now, in this case, the elasticity is below minus 1, right? So it's 0.86. Now that means that the relative change in demand is smaller than the relative change in price. So meaning, now companies can go up with the price. Now demand will go down, but it will not go down to the same extent as a change in price. So that's good for companies. So meaning, in the case of disposable nappies, people don't seem to be very price sensitive. Now, and I don't know if you have kids, but I can totally identify with that notion. So I have 2 little girls, or not that little anymore, but look at these hands. Look at these hands. These hands have changed countless, seriously, countless nappies during the last years, right? Now, and I can assure you, what is the basic benefit you buy that you get when you're looking for nappies? Now, the basic benefit is that everything that's supposed to stay inside stays inside. And no matter what they tell you, changing nappies is no fun, right? And it will never be fun. So the only thing that you're looking for is to make that chore as pleasant as possible so that everything stays inside. And I assure you, right? So once you've found the brand of nappies that does that job, you do not want to change. It's not something you toy around with. You'd rather be happier to pay a bit more. So what I'm trying to say really, I'm a big fan of Pampers. So I'm not endorsing Pampers, but you get the general idea of what I mean.